Good evening. My name is Philip Lee, and I am presenting session 3 of Becoming a Millionaire tonight. Equipment by Edgar Albert Guest. Figure it out for yourself, my lad. You've all the greatest of men have had. 2 arms, 2 hands, 2 legs, 2 eyes, and the brain you use if you would be wise. With this equipment, they all began. So start for the top and say, I can. Look them over, the wise and great. They take their food from a common plate. And similar knives and forks they use. With similar laces, they tie their shoes. The world considers them brave and smart. But you've all they had when they made their start. You can triumph and come to skill. You can be great if only you will. You're well equipped for what fight you choose. You have arms and legs and a brain to use. And the man who has risen great deeds to do began his life with no more than you. You are the handicap you must face. You are the one who must choose your place. You must say where you want to go, how much you will study the truth to know. God has equipped you for life, but he lets you decide what you want to be. Courage must come from the soul within. The man must furnish the will to win. So figure it out for yourself, my lad. You were born with all that the great have had. With your equipment, they all began. Get hold of yourself and say, I can. Here's the agenda for today's session 3. We're going to review last month's session 2 for a few minutes. And then I'm going to go into a pretty in-depth self-assessment. These are on what I call the 3 A's. So we'll talk a little bit about that. Then we're going to do Augment Income plus 5% outside your career. And we're going to talk about Augment Income 5% within your career. And within that topic, I'm going to give an overview of augmenting income. We're going to go over how to think like a CEO. And then we're going to cover what it takes to become CEO of your job. And then for more of a short-term topic, I'm going to explain very clearly how raises work. And that'll give you an understanding of how you can best manage that process. And then last month, we talked about Expand Wealth 5%, and I'm going to revisit it again this month and share with you what I've done in my BAM account for the first month. And then we're going to review where we are in the BAM curriculum and then give you a review of this particular session. So without further ado. So last month we talked about trying to blend long-term and short-term teaching together. So that's very important to give you sort of the long-term strategy, the long-term plans of success, but also give you some pragmatic short-term tactics so that you can get some immediate benefit from this course. We also talked about the ladder to success, how you have to go through all 4 steps in order to achieve a certain level in a certain strategy. And then we spent some time talking about the stock market being $80 trillion in worth, and how over the past 90 years, the S&P 500 has increased an average of 7% a year for those 90 years. We also learned that 70% of the time the stock market goes up in a year, and 30% of the time it actually goes down. So that's very important for you to know and recognize and deal with. And then we spent some time talking about how to expand your wealth, how to invest your money in a BAM account and grow it a minimum of 5% a year. And then I talked about an exercise to cut your expenses by 5%. So on to the self-assessment. So the most important part here is to be honest with yourself. We're not going to share the self-assessment with anyone else but yourself, and it's important that you are honest so that if you need to do some improvements, you can work on that. So the 3 A's that I talk about is attitude, aptitude, and ability. And attitude is really key, keeping a very positive outlook on life, keeping a positive attitude about this course, about your ability to work hard, your willingness to commit to the work to become a millionaire, and your attitude in terms of putting in the time necessary to be successful. So those are all parts of attitude. In terms of aptitude, you need a certain degree of intelligence. You have to be able to absorb the material. You need to be able to learn the material and remember the material. And then finally, you have to have a very open mind about these concepts, which may be foreign to you, may feel a little funny, but you need to have an open mind and you need to try it. And finally, the most difficult is ability. And that's the ability to think about problems, the ability to analyze the problems, the ability to get things done. How good are you at putting together an in-depth plan and following through in that plan and executing the plan to achieve the result? So these are the 3 A's, and I'm not going to do a self-assessment of those 3. So you should have a sheet of paper that says attitude, aptitude, and ability scores. And then we're going to fill that in. So when we talk about attitude, I want you to assess yourself. Where do you sit in terms of the general population? Are you more positive than 70% of them? Then that would be a 7. If you're more positive than 50% of them, then that would be a 5. But give yourself an attitude score, your self-assessment and attitude. Do the same thing for aptitude. If your aptitude exceeds 60% of the population, then give yourself a 6. But give yourself a score for aptitude, and then similarly give yourself a score for ability. How good are you at getting things done, at thinking and analyzing, at putting together plans and executing plans? Are you at 70% of the population? That's a 7. Are you at 90% of the population? That's a 9. So give yourself 3 scores. I'm going to give you a few seconds to get that complete. So hopefully at this point in time, you have completed that exercise. And here's the scoring for that. Hopefully, you have at least a minimum of 8 in each of those 3 areas, the 3 A's. Now, even if you have an 8, you really should be striving for a 9 in each A, because the reason I chose 9 is because that would put you in the top 10% of attitude, aptitude, and ability. And since you want to be a millionaire, which is in the top 10% of the population, it makes sense that you have to rise to the top 10% in terms of attitude, aptitude, and ability. Now, if you don't meet the 9 or the 8, that's really okay. It's not a problem, because I'm going to help you work on that. And that's what the next section is about. So how do you improve your attitude? How do you improve your attitude? Well, we all have thoughts in our mind all the time. I call it daily thoughts. I call it self-talk. We're constantly talking to ourselves. And you have to work hard to recognize what it is that you're saying to yourself. And if there are any negative thoughts, or if your self-talk is negative, you need to correct that, because you will respond to the questions you ask. If you're having a problem, in some part of your life, and your question is, what's wrong with me? That's the wrong question, because then you're going to find things wrong with yourself. A better question would be, this didn't work out. What can I do better? Now you'll be looking for ways to improve yourself, as opposed to looking for what's wrong with yourself. One way to one way to build up a very positive attitude in life is to use positive affirmations. And here's 6 that I use for myself. I'm going to read them. I am very successful. I am very smart. I'm very capable. I have a very positive attitude. I will succeed on my Become a Millionaire project. I will become a millionaire. So if I say that to myself a few times a day for 21 days, that starts to imprint on my brain. So what I want you to do is come up with your own affirmations. I mean, you can use some of mine, but it's best if you do it in your own words and they're affirmations that you actually believe in. The brain is very powerful. What I'm trying to do is unleash your subconscious. So if you tell yourself, I'm very successful over and over and over again, you would be surprised how successful you become. You start to believe it. And when there are challenges, you overcome it because you've told yourself you're successful. If you tell yourself you're very smart and you say that often enough, your brain will start to believe it and you will indeed become smarter. And that's true about each of these affirmations. I think it's very important to look at a glass as being half full. You could just as easily say the glass is half empty because that's equally true. But when you view it as half full, you're looking at the positive side of it. You have to fill your head with many, many happy thoughts, things that make you happy. Because when you're happy, you will approach your problems with a much more positive attitude. Now, be careful. I'm not asking you to delude yourself. I don't want you to lie to yourself. You just need to be positive in the context of the situation. And the example I have here would be Thomas Edison. So as you all know, Thomas Edison invented the incandescent light bulb. But it took him many, many years to successfully invent that incandescent light bulb. And he actually failed over 100 times with different ideas before he finally came upon an idea that worked. So one day a reporter asked Thomas Edison, what does it feel like to fail 100 times? And listen to Thomas Edison's answer. Thomas Edison said, I did not fail 100 times, my friend. I learned 100 different ways that did not work. And I was able to rule those out, and that helped me find the solution. So there you go. He didn't fail 100 times. He succeeded 100 times in finding ways that did not work. That's a very powerful thing to do. And you need to try to do that yourself in the context of your situation. If you find yourself thinking negative thoughts, that's a difficult challenge to overcome. So you really should seek out family and friends, people that you really trust, and talk to them. I think they can help talk you through some of those issues, and you can combat those negative thoughts that way. So for your homework for this month, I want you to create some index cards. I call it virtual index cards, and I'll explain that a little later, with very positive affirmations. 5 or 6 or 7 of them. Use your own words. You can use a few of mine if you like, and then read them 2 or 3 times a day throughout the course of the day. Each time would be about 2 or 3 minutes. 2 or 3 times would be like 5 to 10 minutes. That's all it takes. And you would be amazed how doing that for a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, your brain starts to be enabled such that you feel more successful, you feel smarter, you feel more capable, and you start to actually perform better than if you did not do this. So that's an important exercise with homework 1. How do you improve your aptitude? So this is your ability to learn. First thing you have to be is you've got to be open to new ideas. Many of us have been around for many decades, and we're kind of set in our ways. And it's hard to be open to new ideas, but you need to fight that. You need to keep an open mind, and you need to be willing to learn those new ideas and try those new ideas. You have to put in some more time to learn the material. So that's what aptitude is. It's not always your native ability, but you can compensate by just putting in a little bit more time. I find that when I ask questions about the material, that improves my ability to learn. So feel free to send me messages on Meetup, or usually at the end of these sessions we spend an hour answering questions. So Ask me any question you want, and we'll try to help you develop your understanding. Listen to each video a second or third time. That's the reason I built the Become a Millionaire YouTube website, so that even if you made the session, you can go get a refresher a second and third time. I find when I listen to the videos a second and third time, even though I'm delivering it, I learn things from those videos myself. Now, when you listen to those videos, it's important to take some notes. Be an active listener. Write down what you think are the most important points for each session. Write that down. And after you've written it, test yourself. If there's like 5 points for each lecture, see if you can communicate those 5 points without looking at your notes. Try explaining the material to a friend and see if your friend can explain it back to you. If you can do that, then you've become a teacher. And if you've become a teacher on this material, then you know it well. So homework assignment 2 for this month is to put together virtual index cards for the most important points of each session. So session 1, you should have your 5, 6 points. Session 2, 5, 6 points. And from session 3, your 5, 6 points. And then spend 10 minutes a day looking at those points for 10 minutes. That's all it takes. Now, improving ability is probably the most challenging thing to do. What I think you should do is keep a running list of things to do to become a millionaire. I call it your BAM list, your Become a Millionaire to-do list. Every morning, you select one item from the list and commit to doing it. And then during that day, you should do it. If an item is a little bit larger and it takes maybe more than one day to complete, take some time and break that item into sub-items that can be done in a day. It's very important to do one item a day and make it a habit. Getting things done is one of the keys skills needed to be successful. It's very important to do a small amount every day consistently. I don't want you to do 5 things on one day and then not do anything for 5 days. That's not what we want to do. We want to make it a habit. So we want you to every day do one thing, and that becomes your Become a Millionaire muscle. And you want to do that every day and build that muscle up. So at this point, I would recommend that you use Microsoft's OneNote on your smartphone or your PC. So let me just explain what OneNote is. It's an app that allows you to write down important thoughts you want to remember. And so it's free of charge, and it runs on pretty much any platform you have, your iPhones, Android phones, Windows, Macs, etc. Whatever you write down on any of those devices, it automatically syncs it across all your devices. So you always have the latest information on your PC, on your iPhone, on your Mac. I keep a list of things to do in OneNote, and I cross them off as I do them. So that's one way of improving your ability. I also use OneNote to write down ideas as they occur to me. In the past, I used to carry a notebook around and I would jot down ideas. And that's fine, but I didn't always have my notebook with me. Or if I wanted to see what was in my notebook, it may not always be there. So with the OneNote, because it's on my phone, it's on my PC, I pretty much can access that information anytime, anywhere. And that makes it very, very useful. So this is where I organize my OneNote. So I have one notebook for each year. So I have a notebook for 2020 and 2021. And then within each year, I have sections, which I call them topics. And then within each topic, I sort them by date within the topic. So I find that's a good way to organize information. I can pretty much find what I want anytime, and it's really good for retrieval as well. So here's the download site from Microsoft. There's OneNote for Windows. It's compatible with the iPhone, the Android phone of OneNote. Here's Microsoft's description of OneNote. It actually does a lot more than I just talk about. I use it mostly as a tool to write all sorts of things down, to remind me of things to do, etc. But it actually does a lot more, and you should look into it because some of those things are very helpful as well. Here's an example of how I organize my OneNote. So you see on the left, I have a notebook for every year. And then when I click on Fill 2021, I get these sections. So you have goals and objectives, my Fidelity accounts, my Become a Millionaire folder, positive affirmations, Become a Millionaire learnings, etc. And then when I click into the goals, I see that I originally set my goals on the 25th of January, and I update on the 6th, and I update it again on the 25th. So that just shows you how I do it, and I think it's a very effective way to keep track of information. So when you click on positive affirmations, I get my affirmations here. So that's what I'm suggesting that you do on your smartphone. These are what I call the virtual index cards. And if you have that and you can review it for a couple minutes, 3 times a day, that's 6 minutes, and you will be on your way to changing your attitude. So how do you use OneNote to improve your ability? I think it's a very good tool to get important things done. So whenever I remember the things I need to do, I would pull up my OneNote, jot it in my list of things to do, and now it's been recorded. And as I do them, I cross them off the list. I also use it to record important ideas as they occur to me. In the past, sometimes I would have a brainstorm out of a really good idea. And then by the time I get home, I kind of forgot what it was that I was thinking about, and I can't recreate the thought. With OneNote, I can actually take some quick notes on the idea, and then I can develop that idea when I get home. I have a PC and I have more time, and a keyboard. I spend more time developing the idea. I use OneNote to do brainstorming. So if I have some problem I'm trying to solve, put down a bunch of bullets about I can solve it this way, I can solve it that way, and that just helps me to get my thoughts on paper or into OneNote. And I use sections as virtual index cards for reinforcement, like I showed you with the affirmations. And then the sections are also a way to organize my thoughts. So for homework 3, I want you to download OneNote and create a BAM to-do list and do at least one item on your list for the next 30 days. And that's what it takes to make it a habit. So on to the Augment Income section of this presentation. We had talked about this during session 1, that there are just 2 ways to augment income. One is within your career, and that's like a raise, a promotion, etc. And there are ways to augment your income outside your career. That would be a second job, driving Uber, income property. So what we're going to talk about first is augment income outside your career. And you can see I used the plus 5%, to kind of denote it's a little bit different. So as an example, if you make $50,000 a year and you get a 5% raise, that's actually a $2,500 raise for the year. If you get a part-time job in addition, and you make $20 an hour and you work 5 hours a week, now we're looking at $100 a week. If you do this for 25 weeks or half the year, you'll make an additional $2,500. So that would allow you to make $2,500 from your raise, and then another $2,500 on your second job. So you actually would be at 10% because it's additive to your original 5%. So that would be a 10% score on Augment Income. Some strategies are additive and some are not. So buying a home is additive to cut expense. We'll talk more about that next month. If you're able to increase the amount of your 401k match, that is also additive to augment income. So these are these additive strategies can really, really accelerate your journey to BAM. If right now BAM takes 20 years, by doing additive strategy, you can reduce that to 18, 17, 16 years. So think about different additive strategies you can do for augment income, cut expense, and expand wealth. So here's the worksheet I created for you to augment your income plus 5%. So I want you to just think about different concepts for augmenting income outside your career. It could be you want to be a photographer, or you want to start a little store on eBay, or you want to do consulting on the side. Whatever it is, each of those are concepts. Then try to project how much money you can make a month with that particular concept. And then figure out what percent of your income that is. Is it 2%, 5%, 10%? Then ask yourself how much time it would take to make that much money. And then what I want you to do is for each augment income concept, I want you to rate it, and 10 being the best and 1 being the worst. And here's my ideas for rating. So you have to decide whether it's fun and is it interesting work. You have to decide whether the pay is good. Is it a good rate of pay? Do you have the time to do this? Is this how you want to spend your time? So discuss your worksheet with your BAM buddy, and then make a decision on what you want to do. Hopefully you can augment your income by plus 5% doing this. It shouldn't be that hard, but it does take work, it does take effort, and it does take time. So let's move on to the heart of this presentation, which is to augment income 5% within your career. Let me just start by saying that there are many ways to augment your income. I'm just proposing one way that I know works, but it's by no means the only way. I want to say at the outset that today's lesson or today's teachings are really not easy. They're probably the most challenging ideas that I've presented so far. And you need to realize that you don't have to get it 100% right. It's not necessary. If you get it 51% right, you're doing just fine, okay? So I don't want you to be discouraged if you don't get it right, because it's okay. I didn't have it right for many years. So at a higher level, what I teach is not get a big raise, because that has no context. I teach get the raise that you deserve. So it's not get a big raise, no matter how you perform. It's get a good raise because you've performed well. Let's take a step back. I did a little research on the internet about raises in the year 2020. This is the year of COVID, obviously. The average raise in America was between 3 to 5%. Just recognize that the raises, they vary greatly, and they are based on many factors that are outside your control. So, if your company's doing well, you'll get a bigger raise. If they're not doing so well, you'll get a smaller raise. Depends on geographic location. If you're in a large city like Boston and New York, LA, there's more competition. I think you'll probably get a bigger raise because they're worried about the competition. If you're in Albany or some small town, it's probably harder for you to find an alternative job, so they probably won't pay as well. If you're in the semiconductor industry, which is very hot right now, you'll probably do very well. If you're in travel, in hospitality, that industry is struggling due to COVID, so you probably won't get such a good raise. It depends on the broader economy. Right? If the economy is roaring, then you'll probably get a better raise. If we're in recession, you probably won't get as good a raise. So Another article talked about what they call raise differential. So the best employees were getting an average of about 4.6, and the average employee was getting an average of about 2.7. That just gives you a couple of data points. What's important for you to know is that changing jobs or switching jobs is the most common path to the highest pay raise. Now, I'm not advocating that you change jobs, but I'm just sharing with you this fact that when you change jobs, uh, it's your highest possibility for increasing your income. So I just wanted to share with you a personal example. So back in the mid 80s, when I was working for Digital Equipment Corporation, I had just gotten into sales. And I remember my quota was like 1.5 million, and I ended up doing about 3 million that year. I was 20% of quota. I was the top 10% of the digital sales force. And my manager, my boss, in his infinite wisdom, decided to give me a 2% raise. I just didn't understand it. So I scheduled a meeting with him, and we sat and we spoke for an hour. And he tried to explain to me why this was the right thing and how that was fair, and that because I had a master's degree, that I was already overpaid. He said that I came in being paid higher than other people, and that what he did was completely appropriate. So I went home that night. I was really disturbed. I couldn't sleep, and it just didn't make sense to me. So I scheduled another meeting with him, and we talked for another hour. And he continued with his reasons why the 2% raise was very appropriate for me. And I still didn't buy it. So I kept meeting with him. Over the course of a month, I met with him 5 times. And he basically, at the end of that period of time, he said, "Phil, we have to stop doing this. We have to stop talking about this." He said, "Quite frankly, Phil, that is all you're worth." And that kind of struck a nerve with me. So I basically asked myself, what am I worth? Is that what I'm worth? So over the next few months, I decided to update my resume. I found a bunch of recruiters, headhunters, and I started interviewing. And in the course of a few months, I had interviewed with 8 or 10 companies. And at the end of that process, I had 4 job offers. And I ended up taking the job with Oracle Corporation, and I ended up doubling my income. So I doubled my income, and I guess what he offered me was not what I was worth. I was worth twice as much. So that just gives you a personal example of how changing jobs is the most common path to the highest pay raise, and that certainly was my case when that happened. And the last point is that some companies do offer annual bonus compensation. So usually goes to the higher level employees, but you should find out if your company has that kind of program and how you can participate. So the 2 primary strategies I teach for augmenting your income within your career is to become CEO of your job, number 1, and become CEO of your career, number 2. Both of these strategies are long-term strategies. You won't see the benefits immediately, and it may take years, to learn these concepts and principles and to apply them to your situation. These strategies are very complementary. You should do them both at the same time because one supports the other. It's going to take some time to apply these strategies to your own job and to your own career. So it's going to take time. But remember, these concepts I present here, they transcend become a millionaire. They really will benefit you for a lifetime. It will teach you how to be a great employee and how to get the rewards of being a great employee. So it's such a large topic that I had to break this into 2 segments. So today I will talk about CEO of your job, and next week I'll talk about CEO of your career. So being CEO of your job, this takes years. This is not something you can do quickly. And if you do it properly, you can get a 5 to 10% increase annually without getting a promotion. If you were to get a promotion, you would get another 5-10% on top of your regular raise. So that can be a very significant bump in your pay. And obviously, if you can do that, that will move you up the compensation ladder very quickly. Becoming CEO of your career, this takes even longer. This probably takes decades, and I never even get this right. But every time that you change jobs, you can get an additional 10 to 30% over your regular raise. If you change jobs, and that's without getting that's without advancing the organization. If you advance in the organization, for example, if you went from an employee to a manager, you can probably look at another 10 to 30% on top of the other 10 to 30% when you change organizations. When you're being promoted to director or principal, it's even more money. It's 20 to 40%. If you're going to principal or vice president, that's 20 to 40%. And if you go to vice president or chief to CEO, that's worth almost 40 to 60% more. So that's the kind of benefit you can see from changing jobs. And then I'm going to have a little session on understanding how raises work, which is a nice short-term strategy that will give you immediate benefits. So let's talk about what being CEO of your job means. So again, this is the biggest challenge that I've taught so far. It's not easy, not going to be easy, but it's also not binary. It's not, you either succeed or you don't. There are degrees of success. You can be 25% of the way, you can be 50% of the way, you can be 75% of the way. So it's completely okay to do it in a stepwise fashion. And you just have to keep working at it until you get it. The key to being successful in becoming CEO of your job is really perseverance. You've got to persevere through all of the challenges that you will have doing this. So if I look up the definition of CEO in Wikipedia, it basically says it's the highest ranking employee in the company whose responsibilities include developing and implementing high-level strategies, making big decisions, managing operations and managing resources of the company, and then acting as the main point of communication between the board and the company. So that's what a CEO does. Everything they do falls into one of these four categories. Right? You're developing or implementing strategies, you're making major decisions, you're managing the operations and resources of the company, or you're communicating with the board and the company. So the key words here are company. So if you were to change company to department, what you find is that CEO of a department is the highest ranking employee in the department whose main responsibilities are the same four things. It's just a different scope. They still develop and implement strategies. They still make major decisions. They still manage operations and resources of the department, and they still act as the communication point between the department and the company. Take it one step further, and instead of department, you change it to job. Now we're talking about the highest ranking employee in the job whose main responsibilities are the same four things. Develop and implement strategies, you make decisions, you manage the operations and resources of the job. And that means you manage yourself. You decide how you spend your time, you decide how the job is set up. And then you act as the communication point between the job and the company. So said another way, the job of an employee, manager, director, and CEO are very similar. It's those four things, but it's a different scope. So if you do this right, you're really preparing yourself for being promoted to the next level just by expanding the scope of what you do. but doing similar things. So here's my CEO of job examples. Sales professional are the CEO of their sales territory. A project manager is a CEO of their project. If you work in the production line, well, then you're the CEO of the station, your station in the production line. If you handle support calls, well, you're CEO of the calls that you handle. If you're the VP of sales, well, you're the CEO of the company's sales efforts. If you're a programmer, you're now CEO of the code that you write. So no matter who you are, there's a way to couch your job as a CEO of something, CEO of your job. Here's another example that compares CEO of a company with CEO of a territory and what they do. So it's almost by activity. So in terms of planning, well, as CEO, I plan for the corporation. When I ran a territory, I wrote a plan for the territory. In terms of decision making, as CEO, I decided what products to invest in. As CEO of my territory, I decided where I invested my time. That was the decision I made. In terms of client issues, I had to find out why customers were upset and fix their problems. Well, the CEO of a territory has to do the same thing with his customers. How do you build pipeline? Well, I work with marketing to build a pipeline. If you're running your territory, you prospect and build your pipeline, et cetera, et cetera. So moving on to the next step, how do you think like a CEO? So to make more money be of greater value, it's really that simple. To make more money be of greater value. So let's take a step back and let's act like you are the CEO. And here's a hypothetical situation. What would you do? So if you had a valuable employee that delivers great benefits to your company and they wanted a fair annual raise, what would you say? Would you say yes? Would you say no? Would you say it depends? Well, I would ask two questions. First question is, how do you know you're a valuable employee? And does your manager agree with you? The second question I would ask is, what were these extraordinary benefits that you delivered? And does your manager agree with you? So if the answer to both those questions is yes, that you are a valuable employee and your manager agrees with you, and you deliver benefits and your manager agrees with you, then absolutely, I want to give you a fair raise. I want to give you a very fair raise. Why wouldn't I? I mean, you're a great employee. You're really valuable, and you deliver great benefits to the company. I would be silly not to give you a good and fair raise. At this point, I wanted to mention that becoming CEO of your job, it's a choice. It's a conscious choice. You need to make that choice. And if you choose to become CEO of your job, and you don't have to, but if you do, at that very moment, you are a CEO. Just by deciding to become CEO of your job, you are a CEO. And if you're a CEO, you need to think like a CEO. What does that mean? Well, you need to elevate your thinking. You're no longer just making a living. You're not punching a clock. You're not showing up 9 and leaving at 5. You have to think of your job as a critical component of your company's operations. Whatever you do, it's a critical component of a company's operations. And it's a paradigm shift, one of being an employee, which is being told what to do, to one of being the CEO, where you decide what to do. If you make this shift, this paradigm shift correctly, it's very empowering. It's also very scary because immediately you alone are responsible for every aspect of the job. You can't blame other people for why it's not working. And you alone are accountable for the success and failure. You can't blame other people anymore because you've taken full responsibility. It changes your commitment level to the job. It changes your commitment level to the company. When I was CEO and I have 500-600 employees at PhD, I could tell the people that were committed to their job, and I could tell the people who were just punching the clock. And it was written on their forehead. It's night and day. So depending on where you sit on that spectrum of being an employee or being CEO of your job, people take notice. This simple mindset change will set you up for success. So now that you've chosen to become a CEO, you're in great company. You're in the company of Steve Jobs, Bill Gates, Bezos, Zuckerberg, Phil Lee, and you're the CEO of your job. None of these people were born CEOs. Jack Welch, Warren Buffett, they were not born CEOs. They became CEOs by choice. And that's what you did today. You decided to become a CEO. So here's the steps to becoming CEO of your job. It's actually a 5-step process. Step 1 is being competent. Being competent in your job, doing your job. That's step 1. And then after you've completed that step, then in addition to being competent, you have to be excellent, whatever that means. You're doing more work, you're doing high quality work, you're helping your peers, whatever it is, be excellent means you have to achieve that. And then after you've achieved that, and you have to maintain that, you have to become a leader. What does become a leader mean in your organization? It means that you are a person who's helping other people be successful. Your influence on the organization goes beyond yourself. As a leader, you're leading people towards making the company better. And if you can do that, we look at the next step. You have to be in charge of one major improvement project. Something that improves the productivity of the organization by 10, 15, 20%. You need to make that happen. And then when you make that happen, you have to lead multiple major projects. If you go from 1 to 5, then you will, in fact, become CEO of your job. But that takes time. It takes many years. At level 1, you're basically doing your job. At level 2 and 3, you're adding value. And at level 4 and 5, you're adding tremendous value to an organization. So let's get back to what it means to be competent. So first thing you have to do is you have to clarify in your mind, what does it mean to be competent? And after you clarify that, you have to write it down. You have to put it into a document. And then you have to confirm that document with your manager. And then you have to analyze your performance against that document. How are you performing vis-a-vis what it means to be competent? And if necessary, you should put together a plan to improve so that you would meet more of the criteria for being competent. And then you have to implement that plan. And then you have to cycle through 4 through 6 again until you've addressed all of the shortcomings you have and you're completely competent. Now, 7 steps are good, but what I did was I broke into 2 categories. So the first category is to clarify the issue. That's what steps 1, 2, and 3 are. It's figure out what the issue is, documenting it, and then confirming it with your manager. That's clarifying the issue. Steps 4 through 7 is to address the issue. It's analyzing your performance. It's putting together plans to improve. It's improving, and then doing it over and over again until you reach the be competent level. So this may take a few months. It may take a few years. I mean, it just varies from individual to individual, company to company, and job to job. So to make it easier to remember, I have a couple of process here. First clarify and then address. So to clarify, we use the wheel. The way you read this is you start at 12 o'clock, which is characterized, then you go to document, and then you go to confirm. And you want to keep doing that until you've confirmed what be competent means. And after you've done that, then you move to the next wheel, which is API, which is analyze your performance, put together a plan, and implement the plan. You do that over and over again until you've addressed the issue of be competent. So these are reusable processes, CDC and API, that we will come back to over and over again. But it's a very good set of skills to have to identify what the problem is and then to solve the problem. So let me drill down one more level and talk about what does it mean to be competent? And that's really what Augment Income 5% means. It's to be competent. So we perform the CDC process. So the first thing we do is we have to clarify, what does being competent mean? What does it mean exactly? So if you look up the definition of competence, it says having sufficient skill, knowledge, ability, and or qualifications. So that's what being competent means. So you have to find out what those skills are, what knowledge you have to have, and what level of ability you need to have, and what qualifications. Being competent is necessary but not sufficient. You also need to perform at a competent level. So you may have all the skills, knowledge, and ability, but if you're not working hard, then you may not be performing at that level. So you have to figure out exactly what performing competently means. How much work are we talking about? You have to complete. What's the quality of the work? There may be qualitative parts of the job that you need to perform, and there may be other factors too. So part of this process is to be able to ferret all that out, figure out how you're being managed, and then talk to your manager about his perspective. Make sure you understand where your manager is coming from. And that's the C. And then you have to document it. So you have to write down all those things in detail and make sure every objective meets the definition of SMART objectives, meaning that each objective is specific, they're measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound. So, and then step 3 is confirm. Make sure that your manager agrees with your written definition. And then you move into the next wheel, which is to address the issue, and we call this API, analyze, plan, and implement. So 4 is to now you know what it means to be competent. You and your manager need to analyze your job performance in relationship to that document. If you don't meet the requirements of be competent and perform competently, then you have to work with your manager to develop a detailed plan. And then you have to implement that plan. And then you have to do 4 through 6 over and over again until you get it right. And then there's additional things you can do. You can keep gathering information about your job. The more you know, the better. If you have peers, you should talk to them, see what they think. How are they approaching their job? How are they performing? What are their skills, knowledge, and ability and qualifications do they have? And try to learn from them. Another good thing to do is talk to your manager about your career path. What's the next level? What will you get promoted to? And to get that promotion, what additional skills, knowledge, abilities, and qualifications are required? Find that out. Talk to people who already have that title that you're being promoted to. Get their perspective. At the end of the day, if you're competent and you perform competently, you should be getting a 5% raise annually. So for your homework, do the CDC process on your job by April. So clarify what it means to be competent, document the understanding, and confirm it with your manager. So let's talk a little bit about how raises work. This is a short-term exercise, and they'll really help you get a better feel for how to navigate that process. So I've been a manager, I've been an employee, director, VP, and CEO. So I've been at every single level. And I've had to be involved in raises at every single level, with good employees, with bad employees, with good managers, bad managers, et cetera. So I have a pretty unique perspective. First thing you need to know is that in 90% of the cases, your manager, the person you report to, is the one who recommends the raise for you. And then usually a director or VP would review it and either approve it or they would recommend an adjustment to what was proposed. A CEO, at least when I was CEO, I generally approved what the VPs and directors recommended. I didn't challenge those things because I wasn't as close to the employees. Some companies would put their employees in a stack rank. So let's say a manager has 10 employees. They would rank those 10 employees 1 through 10, 1 being the most valuable and 10 being the least valuable. So I don't know if your company does that, but they might do that. And then in addition, they may merge those lists. So if there are 4 or 5 managers, they would take the 50 employees and they would merge that into one ranked list. And this was a way to ensure fairness across departments, and that one department wasn't getting the highest raises while another department wasn't getting anything. You also need to know that employees are in salary bands that either restrict or elevate their raise. So as an example, if you were making $50,000 and your salary band was $40,000 to $55,000, then you're starting to hit the top of your band. And at that point, you need to get to the next salary band and you need to talk to your HR department about what you need to do that. If you were making $40,000 and your band was $35,000 to $60,000, then you've got a lot of room to get a larger raise. So you just need to know that. Companies also provide the average raise for the current year, and the managers use that as a guide for making recommendations. And stronger managers usually get their recommendations approved, and weaker managers get pushback. So the 2 most important bullets in this slide are the first one, which is your manager is the most important part of your ability to be successful. And you want strong managers because what they say goes. And if you have a weak manager, you need to take a look at that. So I want you to think about the raise percent as a bell curve. We talked about that last time. 68% are within 1 standard deviation of the mean, and 95% are within 2 standard deviations of the mean. So let's apply that to raises. So let's assume that the mean raise, the average raise is 3%, and the standard deviation is 1%. What that means is 68% of people get raises between 2 to 4%, and 95% of people get raises between 1 and 5%. Means that in order to get 4%, you have to perform at 1 standard deviation above the average. To get 5%, you're going to perform at 2 standard deviations above the average. So that's a lot. It's hard to measure performance this way, but you must. You have to be 2 standard deviations above the average to get your 5%. I also wanted to talk a little bit about randomness around the mean, because that's important when it comes to raises. So the example I have here is if you flip the coin 32 times, how many heads would you get? We all know that if it was a fair coin, it would be 50-50. If you flipped it 32 times, you would most likely get 16. In fact, 14% of the time, you would get 16. 13% of the time, you would either get a 15 or a 17. So that's very possible too. To get 14 to 18 would be 11% of the time, so on and so forth. So as you can see, if you only flip 32 coins once, you could actually get 11 or 21. So I mean, if you did it once, the range of outcome is pretty wide. But if you did it more, you would find that 2/3 of the time you would be within the 14 to 18 range. So you have to look at the effectiveness of this strategy. Is also a bell curve with some randomness around the mean. So what does that mean to you? So everything I teach needs to be understood in this context. When I say expand wealth 5%, well, if you did it once, you could have 3%, you could be 7%, it could be 1%, it could be 7, 1%, it could be 9%. So you get some randomness around the mean just because life is random. When we talk about augment income 5% in this session, you may deserve a 5% raise, but you could get a 3% raise because of some randomness, or you could get 7% raise. So understand the more years that you track, the more likely it will go to the average. But if you pick one particular year, it could be experiencing some randomness around the mean. When I talk about the S&P growing 7% a year, that's the mean. But there's, it could be as you could lose 30%, or you could make 50%. So there's a wide range around the mean. When we talk about stock market performance of the top 88 ETFs, the average return is 17% a year. So, that's 88 ETFs. So that's a pretty large number of ETFs to be looking at. So, but what's more important is that since the S&P grows 7% a year, that's actually 10% above the S&P 500. So it's actually not 7%, it's 10% greater than S&P 500. So the more you do this, you'll go towards the mean. So remember I talked about making at least 5%. Well, this strategy that I'm teaching you could actually do closer to 17%. But because there's randomness around the mean, that's why I talked about at least 5%. So we'll see. So let's look at the ACE ladder to success. Last month we did a cut and expand 5%. This month we did augment 5%. And we actually also did augment plus 5%. So you should add that to your chart and record that you've done the plus 5 for augment income. So let's look at the expand wealth by 5% strategy. So here's how I filled out my ETF selection worksheet. I picked SOX number 1, and the reason I did that was it was the number 1 ETF in terms of 10-year return. I picked Vanguard Technology because I think information technology is always needed. I picked IGV because I love software, and it's number 10 on the list. I picked IGM because I like tech in general, and that's number 11 on the list. I picked QQQ because NASDAQ has performed very well, etc. So here's my BAM account. So you can see I bought SOX, I bought VGT, IGV, and QQQ. And you can see after 4 weeks, I'm down $1.50. Down $1.50. So that converts to about I'm down 0.15%. And if you annualize it, it's really down 1.96%. But remember, we're looking at a much longer horizon. We're not looking at a month, we're looking at 3 to 5 years. And I also know that on average, the S&P is down 30% of the time. So at this point, I have no concerns about my investments, and we'll revisit this next month. But I also provide a tool for you to calculate your return on investment. So this is in your BAM folder for session 3. The yellow is my example data. So if you look at the March 2nd column, that's today. Today's value is $998.50. The gain and losses, I'm down $1.50. That's over 28 days. So the return on 18 days is a negative 0.15%. But if you annualize it, it's actually, I'm down 1.96%. So then, I'm assuming that if I get to $1,005 by March 15, then that would be a 4.45% annually. If I get to $1,010, that's up 6% annually. So the next chart is what you should fill out. You should fill out the blue cells. So that's the date and the amount. And then you should look at the annualized return. That's the number you need to take a look at. So. So now I'm going to tell you a little bit about an improvement to the baby steps I was telling you about. Remember, baby steps did not provide the highest return, but it was the easiest to implement. So now I'm going to recommend a simple adjustment to make your return better. I want you to expand your ETF list from 10 to 30. So instead of just coming up with 10 ETFs, I want you to come up with 30 ETFs. It's okay, and it's even desirable to have ETFs from the same sector or strategy. That's okay at this point, because with 30, you're pretty well diversified. And if you had a couple in semiconductors, a couple in IT and software, that's completely fine. You should create a watch list for those 30 ETFs. And starting week 5, I want you to add 2 new decision criteria. Don't buy on an up day. So if the S&P is up that day, don't buy. Buy on the down day. And then on the down days, you look for the ETFs with the highest percent declines from the day before. You want to buy low and sell high. So just give you an example. So if you bought stocks yesterday, March 1st, at 4 p.m., you would have bought for $430. When stocks rises to 440, you will have gotten a 2.3% gain. That's the absolute gain for that. If you bought stocks at 10 a.m. this morning for 425, and and it rose to the same 440, your gain's now 3.3%. That's almost a 40% better increase than the 2.3%. And I usually like to buy them at 3 to 5% below yesterday's price. That gives me an automatic 3 to 5% boost on the return. So here's my watch list, sorted by percent change, which is XBI is down 1.5%, PSI is down 1.4%, etc. And you can see the stocks was 425, 99. This was at 10 a.m. today. So that's how I would do it. So just as a summary, because I've talked about a lot of things, first thing you do is expand the list from 10 to 30. Put those 30 into a watch list. Every morning, decide if that is a day to invest. Don't invest if the S&P goes up, and invest if the S&P goes down more than 1%. If it's between 0 and 1%, the S&P is down, then use your judgment. If it's your day to invest, then look at your watch list and pick your favorite ETF with the highest decline. That will give you another 3 to 4 to 5% on your return, just by doing the simple modification to the basic strategy. So here's a summary of where we are in terms of the curriculum. So we've completed session 1, which was Augment, Cut, and Expand. We've completed session 2, which is Expand Wealth and Cut Expense by 5%. And then we just completed Augment Income by 5%. Next month, we're going to do Augment Income by 10%, which is a CEO of Korea. And we're going to do Cut Expense 10%, which is to buy a home. And then in May, we're going to put together your BAM project plan. So that's the curriculum for the next first 5 months. So just by way of summary, what did we learn today? So you did your self-assessment and you got some ideas of how to improve your attitude, your aptitude, and your ability. Hopefully, you found a way to augment your income plus 5% outside your career. And then we talked a lot about 5% within your career. We talked about some reusable processes, which is CDC and API. And we talked about improving the baby steps investing by the buy low, sell high strategy. And now you've completed 25% of the course. Congratulations. Homework for session 3 is download OneNote, create the virtual index card for affirmations, create the virtual index card for what you've learned, create your BAM to-do list, and complete 1 item a day for 30 days. Perform CDC on your current job. Next month, perform API. You'll continue to invest your $100 a week and spend 2 to 3 minutes a day at 4 p.m. to look at it. If you're new to BAM, you'll go look at session 1 and 2 on the BAM YouTube site. If you haven't gotten access to the BAM folder, send me an email and I'll grant you access. And then finally, what I've added to the BAM folder session 3 is the Augment Income worksheet, the BAM worksheet for session 3, and then the Calculate Annual Return spreadsheet. And that's it. Well, thank you for joining me, and we'll see you next month.